is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano, Jonas Shaffer, joined by beat reporter Giana Han here on a Thursday in March. Guys, it's been more than 24 hours since our last episode. I can't believe it. This is the first time that we've really had a gap between podcasts. There hasn't been a gap in news. We've just haven't had the time to sit down and talk about everything that has happened over the last 36 hours. We're going to talk a lot today about Trey Hendrickson. The fact that the Ravens move on from Maxx Crosby by inking a deal with a star edge rusher from a division rival, signing him to a 4-year deal. We'll talk about what we heard from Ravens general manager Eric DeCosta when he met with the media yesterday to talk about the addition of Trey Hendrickson as well as the Maxx Crosby deal falling apart. We'll talk about the fact that Lamar Jackson's contract is getting restructured, and then numerous additions and subtractions from this Ravens roster in free agency. But Giana, glad to have you on here. It has been a sleepless week for us.
Yes, I didn't want to put makeup on today. I was like, Jonas doesn't wear makeup on the podcast. But then I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh, you can tell that they backed out of a trade. They signed another guy, and that Lamar restructured, and I covered Caps games. So 2 Caps games. So I was like, at least need to cover up the dark circles.
Can you believe Jonas looks that good without makeup?
I know.
This is the time when I reveal to you guys that I do wear nude lipstick.
I knew it. Something was off there, Jonas. You just can't look that good.
I don't think that's what nude lipstick looks like, Jonas. We should
like you would know. Like you would know, Giana. Like you would know.
What was that trend that was going around where they had like players try to identify like girls' beauty products? Should do that to you guys.
Yeah, I would whiff. I mean, during my Masson days, I did get a little bit of a tutorial on makeup, but every time I see my sister, she tries to remind me that a little bit of some foundation wouldn't help when I'm on camera this often. But I'm like, it's YouTube. The quality isn't that good anyway. People can't really see the shine. But
I know my camera's like, it looks like one of those Snapchat filters. It's kind of hazy right now.
Paul, in middle school, some of the popular girls wanted to ombre my hair, and I think that's the closest that I got to like really high fashion. It's like when you dye it yellow. Isn't that right, G? HOMBRE?
No. It's called wow. I don't dye my hair, so what is it called? That's not how you
creates a gradual two-tone color transition, typically from darker roots to lighter ends.
Well, now they call it balayage, but yes, it's like a
that's a word of the day.
So I think I would go from red to yellow, right? Basically, is that what we're talking about?
I think it would be more, the yellow would be at the end, and it would like.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, I guess you're thinking that way.
What's the name of the U.S. figure skater who just had streaks in her hair of the blonde?
What's her name? She's a national hero.
Alicia Liu, get off the freaking podcast, Paul.
Asian dad, like.
I know. I need
Kyle and me. Shout out to all the Asians with Asian dads.
As soon as Winter Olympics ends, I hate to say this, but a lot of that information goes out of my brain. I know I need to retain it from year to year, but it just kind of disappears. She was great. She was phenomenal. I love seeing her on Jimmy Fallon too. Well, if you're watching,
I could do without Jimmy Fallon.
If you're watching on X, Facebook, or YouTube, please let us know what you think of the show. Like, rate, review, subscribe anywhere that you get your podcasts. By the way, you could be listening to us after the fact on any of your favorite podcast platforms, in which case, like, rate, review, subscribe. If you write us a 5-star review, I will read it out here on the show. And somebody wrote us a 5-star review, guys, and they used that 5-star review not to talk about the podcast itself, but to bash the Ravens. As Ovo Brilzy says, who didn't do their due diligence? I assume that they're talking about Maxx Crosby here. Like, WTF is really on. Everyone leaving, and now Max. Still no O-line. Lamar extension? Will Lamar leave? Steve Bisciotti should expeditiously fire Eric. Thank you for the comment. I like the fact that they took advantage of the fact that we will read out 5-star reviews. It's funny because some people give us like less than 5-star reviews and have critical things to say about us. Just give us a 5-star review and be critical, because then I have to read out your critical comments. That's the way to really game the system.
I do wonder if we followed up with that person like within the past 24 hours, whether their opinion would have changed, because it seems like the facts of the case on the ground have definitely twisted in a way where Ravens fans are a lot more defensive about what exactly happened with Maxx Crosby and Trey Hendrickson than they initially felt on Tuesday night.
for sure. The last time that we podcasted was Tuesday night, which was in the immediate aftermath of the Maxx Crosby deal falling through. And a lot has happened since then. Let's talk first and foremost about what Eric DeCosta had to say about how this whole thing fell through. He didn't go into the details on the medicals for Maxx Crosby, which is to be expected. I don't think anybody expected EDC to really explain what went wrong here. But he said they were not able to complete the process of the trade due to their assessment of the situation. He said he was gutted by the fact that this deal fell through. He talked about how Maxx Crosby is one of his favorite players in the NFL. And he also talked about something that we had heard from national reporters earlier in the day, which was that even after the Ravens had traded for Maxx Crosby and agreed to that deal, that they were still thinking about signing and trying to sign Trey Hendrickson to pair with Maxx Crosby, which would be an insane defensive line, but it would also be an insane amount of money to commit to one position in a single offseason, albeit a position of huge importance to this Ravens team. Regardless of whether they had Maxx Crosby in the building or not, they would still have to do other work along that defensive line, and they still probably have to do other work along that defensive line now that Trey Hendrickson is in there. But guys, did you believe Eric DeCosta when he said, yeah, even after we had agreed to trade for Maxx Crosby, we were looking at signing Trey Hendrickson to pair with Maxx Crosby?
Well, Jonas and I were texting about this. So we were trying to crunch the cap numbers, and there is a way you could have made it work technically, but you would have had to do a lot of other stuff. You would have had to do some searching in the couch cushions for change, as Eric DeCosta says. Especially considering you didn't get a Lamar extension done. You just got a restructure. Again, that could turn into an extension. But as of the beginning of the new league year, which is when you need to be cap compliant, it wasn't done. So there's that. There's also all the other smaller deals that you added, which aren't huge, but they still cost money. And there's the uncertainty around Namdi and how much that's going to be on not necessarily how much it's going to be on the cap, but how much are you going to be paying to a guy that may or may not be playing. And as you said, there's going to be so many other spots. So I believe they were thinking about it. I believe they were talking about it. I believe that the conversation was probably ongoing with Hendrickson's agent. I believe it started before the Maxx Crosby trade, because that's what you should be doing. That's how this works. But I don't know how realistic it actually would have been. Jonas? Maybe that was thrown out there, but would that actually have happened?
Yeah, Eric, I don't want to say he pushed back on that hypothetical yesterday, but he didn't sound totally gung-ho about it possibly coming together. The way that the national reports initially came out, it made it seem like this was a idea that Maxx Crosby and Trey Hendrickson had kind of hatched last week or over the weekend. Hey, wouldn't it be great if you and I combined forces? And by the way, Paul, remind me to tell you about the nicknames that I had for those guys as pass rush duo. And
why don't you share them on the podcast?
No, I know. After we're done with the actual
the serious conversation,
serious conversation here, the way the national reports came out, it made it seem like Trey Hendrickson almost was willing to take less money than he got from the Ravens to be on a potential Super Bowl favorite, to play with Maxx Crosby, to have Maxx Crosby be the hard-nosed run defender, and Trey Hendrickson would be the guy on the other end of the line of scrimmage who could get those one-on-ones. But then, you see, obviously, the Ravens coming over the top for what we think is the most money, and it does just sound like the Ravens kind of threw their hat in the mix late once they realized that the Maxx Crosby deal was not going to come together. So, I'm sure the truth is somewhere in there. It's hard to know, and I guess we'll probably know better if we get a chance to talk to Trey Hendrickson today or tomorrow about whether those two guys actually crossed paths, how they knew each other, how much interest they had in playing with one another, and whether the decision to go one way or another with that Crosby deal affected the other person's plans.
Yeah, it would have been an insane amount of money to commit in one offseason to a single position. And granted, both guys could be on the field at the same time. You have one guy on one side and one on the other, but it would have to be with Trey Hendrickson taking less money, because if he had agreed to a deal of $28 million a year and you already have Maxx Crosby on his deal without a restructure or extension at $30 million a year, you're talking about adding $58 million in new money for defensive ends, which would be an impressive showing on the field. It would certainly be a sight to see getting after quarterbacks, but it would be hard to do much else and hard to upgrade the rest of your roster. When asked about the perception or the idea out there that the Ravens backed out of this Maxx Crosby deal because they got cold feet, Eric DeCosta was asked about it. Here was his answer yesterday.
I mean, I understand it. I understand it. We live in that age of skepticism and people question, especially people that don't really know me or know the Ravens culture and the Ravens organization. So I understand it. As I said at the beginning, we've got a responsibility. I've got a responsibility to the Ravens, to this community, to our fans, and to Steve Bisciotti to do what we think is best for the club. And that's what we always try to do. Every decision we make is based on this idea: is this the best thing for the Ravens? It's very, very challenging. Again, I understand how people might, maybe from afar, would feel that way, but nobody's more upset about this than me. Gutted by it, actually, and so a big regret for me. But we will move on as a football team, and I think there's many, many opportunities for us to grow as a team, to become a better team, to build a roster, and to be the team that we want.
Jonas, Giana, you guys have both written about this in the 36 hours since the Maxx Crosby deal fell apart from different perspectives. And Jonas, I want to start with your perspective because you talked to a doctor about this and got the physician side of things. To me, the biggest question is, did the Ravens see something on the medical report during the physical that they were not expecting? They knew that Maxx Crosby got surgery to repair his meniscus in January. They knew that he was not going to be 100% and be able to go out there and play an NFL game today as soon as this trade went through. But if they saw something that they didn't expect to see during the physical, during the medical exam, it would be understandable that they would back out of this deal. If they didn't, if they saw just what they expected, that's less understandable. Jonas, from your perspective and from your conversations with the physician, what did you learn about what that medical exam entails and what a team could learn from that?
Yeah, let's just kind of start like during the kind of player acquisition process, because I think there was this narrative that, if you were a Ravens fan, was maybe appealing that the Raiders had misrepresented Maxx Crosby's medical information during the course of this trade process and this transaction. But from again talking to the former New England Patriots team physician, who is still, I think, involved in these kinds of consultations on occasion, he said that basically there is this body of evidence that is collected over the length of a player's career. Sometimes it even goes back, as far back as college, maybe from their days at the combine, from their testing at the combine. And once a team has basically given the go-ahead to another team to look at it because they're going to acquire it, then those teams' physicians, those teams' officials have access to it. And that includes, treatment history, that includes imaging, that includes just like doctor's notes. So the Ravens would have access to all of that. The thing that is, I think, probably the stick in the mud here is just the fact that because this was a meniscus repair and not a meniscus trim, as you said, Paul, like the rehab for this takes so much longer. Like it is 3 months post-op until you can actually start to walk or run again. You're not even supposed to be on your feet for, I think, 6 weeks post-op. So basically, there wasn't, according to the Maryland physician, the University of Maryland School of Medicine physician that I spoke to, who is an expert in knee rehab, there wasn't a lot of value, the way he sees it, in using an MRI to gather where exactly a knee is. You just put together maybe some of the information that you get that from that imaging. If you do indeed ask for an MRI at the physical, and you compare it to, what the knee looked like before the surgery, maybe what the knee looked like right after surgery, And then you basically have to do some forecasting about what this knee is going to look like in the next 3 months or so, the next 4 months or so. Like, I think Maxx Crosby said that the plan for him was to be ready by June or July, that he was ahead of schedule. But this is just, it's like, asking what the Ravens are going to be in the playoffs after week 4, week 5. You can have a sense for maybe how good or bad they will be, but you can't really know for sure. And it's not just the meniscus repair for Maxx Crosby. Like, I think he's had a previous knee operation, maybe multiple knee operations that could have affected not just the meniscus, but the knee itself and everything else that goes with that. So you're dealing with arthritis, you're dealing with like basically kind of potholes potentially in the meniscus that would also be problematic. There's just a potential minefield that the Ravens were stepping into with all of this. So I think, like, the idea that the Ravens had buyer's remorse or got cold feet, I think it's true to an extent, because obviously they bailed on the deal, but it's whether it was a bailing that was reasonable, that like 31 other NFL teams would have done in that same case if they had access to the information that the Ravens did. And listen, I haven't gotten confirmation on just who the Ravens consulted for this, but the national reporters are saying that the Ravens brought in 5 independent doctors to look at Maxx Crosby's knee as they determined what exactly was going to be the strategy here. So that, to me, like, tells you that they were interested in just having a chance that this could go, that they could be convinced that this was going to work out in the long term. And I think I understand why everyone has these conspiracies about the Ravens, because they did end up with Trey Hendrickson. They did end up with their 2 first-round picks back. But I think it's fair to say, like, that the Raiders probably did themselves no favor with this whole situation, because back in September, Maxx Crosby knew, so presumably the Raiders knew, that he would need an operation on this meniscus in the offseason. He played through it. He hurts that left knee again in like mid-October, late October. He continues to play through it, continues to have a great season, but he's not shut down until the second to last week of the regular season. So if we can do this all over again and they're shutting Maxx Crosby down for the rest of the season after that mid-October injury, then you're talking about like a more, a timeline that is more amenable to a reasonable diagnosis, a more reasonable prognosis about where Maxx Crosby would be going rehab wise. So I understand why the Raiders and their fans would be very, very pissed about this. But you can say that they basically shot themselves in the foot with this by continuing to play with this guy and assuming that you would be able to patch things up with him and that he wouldn't want out of this franchise. And again, like, maybe the fact that he got pulled out of that week 17 game was the breaking point in all this. And maybe he would have wanted to be back with the Raiders in 2026 had they shut him down in mid-October. But, there was another path forward that I think would have been a lot more, probably better for his knee and definitely better for the evaluation of that knee had the Raiders chosen him.
To play devil's advocate, though, in October, maybe the Raiders realized at that point that the wheels were falling off their season. But at the beginning of the season, they couldn't have known that the season was going to collapse the way it did. They just brought in Pete Carroll. They were expecting to win that season. And if the player was telling them that he was willing to play through it, the team ultimately has to have the player's best interest and long-term best interest at heart. But what ended their relationship, at least for the time being, sounds like they have made up, is the fact that they shut him down with 2 games remaining. So if they had done it back in September or October, they could have ruined that relationship even earlier and told him that he needed to get surgery. They weren't thinking about, in September, well, we got to preserve his trade value come March 2026. I mean, they were thinking about winning that season. So I don't know how they might have had the foresight to do that. But Gianna,
go ahead. Like, if he's the most important asset on your team and you don't know if he's going to be an asset for your team or for you in trade talks, and you know that the most important ability of any NFL player is their availability, then why would you throw him out there knowing that there's a potentially degenerative condition at risk here?
Well, did they know that? I mean, do we know if they knew in September and October that was going to be an eventuality?
I mean, like, obviously they had evidence of what that knee looked like before the season, and then Maxx Crosby said, I don't know when exactly, but again, he said he knew on his podcast as early as September, so before a subsequent knee injury, that he would need meniscus surgery. Maybe it would have only been a meniscus trim, which again, you are just cutting away the dead meniscus cartilage that is kind of acting as those shock absorbers for the knee, as opposed to a full meniscus repair, which is a more comprehensive thing where you are suturing the knee together and hoping it is revitalized that way. Again, there's no way for us to know. All this is inscrutable to a degree, but like, I mean, Paul, you're familiar with like everything that happened with Joel Embiid and the process and the 76ers just like doing what you can to protect players from themselves. You could say that the Raiders did not do a good enough job of protecting Maxx Crosby from himself. Like, if he's going to play, then don't have him play 8 straight games in a row without taking a single defensive snap off.
Right. And for a Ravens perspective, I mean, I think Ravens fans have at times, to compare it to Lamar Jackson, have at times been frustrated when Lamar Jackson has not been ready to go when he is still recovering from injury. I mean, think about last year. The Ravens were expecting to get him back before the bye. And not only does he not return for the bye with that hamstring injury, but he misses the first game out of the bye as well. So you do have to have a lot of patience and understanding for these players that know their body better than anybody else. And also understanding that these teams are responsible for protecting their best assets. But this is not a Raiders podcast. This is a Ravens podcast. We'll flip it over to the Ravens side. I mean, Giana, what was, in your conversations around the league and with sources, what was your perception of how people view the Ravens' decision to back out of the Maxx Crosby trade?
Yeah, whatever, like, you want to believe from your side versus Jonas's side that you both just presented. I think it comes back to like all that was reported and out there in public. And so I think the problem here to a lot of league sources is that you knew all of this, you knew all the potentials. And when contemplating a trade this big, you should have already evaluated that risk. Now, there are people who are saying like, a deal's not done until a deal's done, until the ink is dry. So this happens, and maybe it doesn't happen at this big of level. Someone said that it was a 5 to 10 year occurrence that something would happen at this level. It happens all the time at smaller levels because people fail physicals. However, that's one perspective. The other perspective is, yeah, but this is something that affects the league as a whole, right? It's not just the Raiders and the Ravens who are affected, but it's also all the people who wanted to get Crosby, all the people who wanted a pass rusher in general, changing the market prices. So there's a responsibility a lot of people feel for you to have already done that research and already contemplated that risk before you make the trade. And so I did ask some people, like, can you, I don't know if people saw, I was actually at hockey yesterday and all the hockey players, including front office people, were asking me about the Crosby trade. And they all asked me like, why didn't they do the physical before the trade? And so I was like, oh, like, can you do that? And people said, yes, you can. Like, if it's up to the team that's trading him to allow that. But like, if you want to trade him, that's something you can do. You can allow the other team to give the physical before you make it known that you are officially doing this trade. So I think that just whether, I'm not saying the Ravens got cold feet. I'm not going to take a stance either way because there's just so many things that my head is sitting. I don't know which one to choose. But I will say there is definitely a perception out there that they got cold feet because it was a huge trade. There's immediate media discourse about, was he worth it? And also, is Eric DeCosta inadvertently acknowledging that his seat is hot? He's straying from not just personal, but organizational philosophy. So there's just this perception. And then immediately they back out, and everyone's first thought is they're going to get Trey Hendrickson, and then they do. So, the clip you just played, like DeCosta is saying that the people who know them know how they work. And I certainly heard that from some people, but then at the same time, there are reports, The Athletic just reported, that people do know how they work, and the way they work is they, quote, F around with people. F with a PH, Jonas. But so there are certainly people who like the Ravens and who don't like the Ravens. And multiple of my sources came from like the same backgrounds who like the Ravens. So maybe that background likes the Ravens. So I think there is this perception out there. And I don't know there's much the Ravens can do to offset it. I think DeCosta said all the right things, but obviously he's going to say all the right things. And I don't think we'll ever truly know what the truth is, what really happened, unless someone in the Ravens decides to do a tell-all, which is also against organizational philosophy and patterns. And I don't know if we'll tell if they're right until Crosby has multiple years of dominant seasons, which some other freak accident could prevent, you know? So it's going to be very hard. Like, it's all just speculation, and Ravens fans can be happy about this because it's worked out for their team, but and it's certainly understandable that other people will be unhappy about it because it affected everyone else. But yeah, there's a lot, and honestly, it probably won't make that big of a difference. A lot of people are saying, like, yeah, teams might be wary, agents might be wary, but like, you really don't have a recourse, right? It's not like you can be like, oh, well, these guys packed out a trade, so I'm going to take this precaution when I trade with them. Like, there's nothing different you can do. All you can do is add that into your level of like risk evaluation. So,
like, I think the question that I should have been more direct in asking Eric yesterday about was, basically, you got this deal done on Friday. Why does it take until Monday for Maxx Crosby to fly to Baltimore? And then why do you wait another day to do the evaluation, considering the maelstrom that is swirling around you? Like, get this done quicker, know what you have to deal with by noon Monday, and then move on from there. Like, why drag your feet with something like this? By doing it like that, you open yourself up to the kinds of conspiracy theories that are now permeating, because, as Giana said, you know, you can pivot as quickly as the Ravens did from the deal falling apart on Tuesday to you agreeing to terms with Trey Hendrickson on Wednesday morning. If the Ravens had more of a buffer between them figuring things out by, let's say, Monday afternoon, and them pivoting to Trey Hendrickson by, let's say, Tuesday night or Wednesday morning with the same timeline, then you probably are not exposing yourself to the kinds of suspicions around the league that are now, flowing freely.
Yeah, and they could have made this trade for a month. I mean, the Ravens could have decided to come over the top with that offer that the Raiders couldn't refuse with 2 first-round picks well before free agency started. But deadline spur action, and that's apparently what happened there. EDC said it hasn't stopped his phone from ringing, that teams are still calling him, and teams have short memories. I mean, ultimately, they're all swimming in the same pool, and they do have to do business with each other. And as much as they might be frustrated about how this went down, they're not necessarily going to harm their own team building in order to spite Eric DeCosta and the Ravens. I mean, I was reading Steven Ruiz of The Ringer, and he pointed out the fact that Josh McDaniels, at one time, spurned the Indianapolis Colts, agreed to a deal to become their head coach, kept them strung along, and then ultimately bailed out of it. And 2 years later, he signs a deal to become the Raiders head coach. So teams have short memories when it comes to this. And I don't anticipate this really impacting the way that other teams do business with the Ravens. And clearly it didn't impact the fact that Trey Hendrickson still wanted to come to Baltimore, still wanted to sign that deal with the Ravens. 14 hours after that deal falls through, he says, sign me up. You're going to pay me $28 million a year. I will happily take that. Let's talk about Trey Hendrickson and that addition, because we're now 30 minutes into the podcast, and we haven't had a chance really to break down the fact that the Ravens signed a player to the most money they've ever committed to an external free agent. A 4-year deal worth reported $112 million can go up to $120 million. Trey Hendrickson, I know a lot of Ravens fans are quite familiar with his talents, but 2017 third-round pick by the New Orleans Saints out of Florida Atlantic, 81 sacks in 117 career games. He has got 4 double-digit sack seasons, including 2 seasons, back-to-back seasons with 17 and a half sacks. He is another guy who has played well against the Ravens and taken advantage of the Ravens offensive line. 5 sacks in 8 games against Baltimore. His situation is also one that has injury kind of plaguing it in the recent past. He held out for a new contract last summer. Eventually, they got a deal done that gave him a raise in 2025, but no extension. Played just 7 games last year, had 4 sacks, but then had core muscle surgery in early December that ended his season. So he is also coming off injury. He is also a few years older, 2 to 3 years older than Maxx Crosby, but he is a more talented sacker of the quarterback. He is not nearly the run defender that Maxx Crosby is, and he will not be on the field nearly as much as Maxx Crosby will be for the Raiders, we assume, this season, or Maxx Crosby would have for the Ravens. But he gets after the quarterback, and he is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL.
Yeah, I think I would probably put him and Crosby on the same level in terms of pure pass rush ability. I think the fact that Max has just been on one bad team after another means that he just hasn't had the opportunity to get to the quarterback, in those kind of closeout scenarios as often as Hendrickson has. But I think they win the same kind of way. They are technicians. Trey Hendrickson, as we mentioned on the Maxx Crosby pod last week, has one of the best get-offs in the NFL still, despite being over 30. He has, those T-Rex arms. So I think it's interesting that he could come in and maybe be a kind of model for Mike Green, like guys who win with their burst off the line of scrimmage and have to make the most of not having a terrific wingspan. So I can be kind of curious to monitor that partnership there. But obviously the big difference here between Maxx Crosby and Trey Hendrickson, Paul, as you said, is that run defense. Maxx Crosby was the prototypical Jesse Minter edge rusher. He is the pass rush burst of Odafe Owe with the run setting, hard nosed, FU mentality of Khalil Mack. And Trey Hendrickson is only one half of that equation. He just has not been a good run defender. Maybe he can become a better run defender, pairing with Anthony Weaver, getting in this Jesse Minter defense, working with the coach the Ravens have for this new staff. The short arms haven't really gotten in the way of Ruben Bain, for example, being a terrific run defender. A lot of it just comes down to want to and technique and knowing where you're supposed to be. But this is a guy who has been a closer for the Bengals. I think he's up there in the total number of sacks in the fourth quarter over the past few years. Obviously, we led the NFL in sacks 2 years ago. He looks like a guy whose game will age relatively well. I think the main concern is just the core muscle surgery that he had last year and the millions and millions of dollars you're guaranteeing to this guy, which is not something that you would have guaranteed to Maxx Crosby, because again, the Raiders would have absorbed all that guaranteed money in the trade, and Maxx Crosby's deal had a structure where it was a lot more flexible. But the trade-off for that was, of course, the 2 first-round picks that the Ravens gave up to get him. So I'm curious to see how his game will change, if at all, in this Baltimore defense. I think you could still make the argument that they need someone else, like a veteran, maybe a better than Tavius Robinson type veteran, to be the hard end of that defensive line on the other side, opposite Trey Hendrickson. But I don't know. It's because of just how quickly this whiplash happened. It does seem like everyone is just forgetting how good Trey Hendrickson has been as a pass rusher over the past couple of years.
Yeah, if the Maxx Crosby deal never happens, we're talking about Trey Hendrickson for multiple podcasts in a row, because he is a game-changing acquisition for this defense. He is going to dramatically change Jesse Minter and Anthony Weaver's defense and immediately give them a floor, assuming he is healthy, in terms of getting to the quarterback. It's something that they struggled with mightily last year. It was their second biggest need in my mind. I think biggest need is O-line, protecting Lamar Jackson, but right below it is getting to the opposing quarterback. How many times last year were they unable to close out games, unable to get wins because they couldn't get to the opposing quarterback? Hendrickson, as mentioned, is a couple years older than Maxx Crosby. Hendrickson is not the run defender that Crosby is. The snap counts are also dramatically different, despite the fact that Hendrickson has been in the league for longer. 4,500 snaps in his career compared to Maxx Crosby's almost 6,500, and a lot of that is due to the run defense. Jonas, you mentioned the fact that maybe the slightly lower sack production for Maxx Crosby in his career is due to the fact that he has habitually been on bad teams, whereas Hendrickson has only occasionally been on bad teams. Hendrickson with 81 sacks in 117 games. Crosby had 69 and a half sacks in 110 games. But maybe the fact that Trey Hendrickson will be on the field less often, the fact that he will not be asked to do quite as much, and the fact that he does not have a knee injury could mean that this contract could look better in the long term than maybe a new contract could have for Maxx Crosby if he had come in here and signed an extension. But Gianna, what did you make of the swap for Maxx Crosby and Trey Hendrickson?
Yeah, I was like, you went from a 5-time Pro Bowler to a 4-time Pro Bowler, but then you even out with the 2 first, but you don't have to pay 2 first-round picks. And you're paying you could have restructured Maxx Crosby's contract, but you're paying a little bit less per year than Crosby costs. But going back to what you said about run defender versus pass rusher, I think that the Ravens, where they really needed to upgrade was at pass rush and not run defense along the line. They can always get better, but that was relatively solid. Travis Jones did great. Unfortunately, Brent Urban helps out, and he probably, I don't know if he'll be back because he's also older, but they re-signed John Jenkins. So they do have some options there. And, if Nnamdi comes back, again, huge question mark there. That's why we chose that.
Yet to be written, as Eric DeCosta said yesterday.
Remaining the Nnamdi Madubuike reporter, I'll just keep asking about him. But so I think that that's where they needed it the most. And so that's fine to me that he's not quite as stout in the run defense. And as you mentioned, there's Tavius Robinson, and we don't quite know where he would be if he didn't break his foot, but he is strong in the run. He has been even before he started to really take off. So I think pass rush is where you needed it most. I don't know the ins and outs of Hendrickson's injury because we've been so focused on meniscuses lately. I just from my past as a hockey reporter, core injuries are kind of scary because the core really affects everything. And I'm just thinking about the different types of moves that pass rushers do and how much I can pull on that. And then I'm also thinking about, and this is on the negative side, there's so much more on the positive side, but the fact that he's 31 and it's a 4-year deal, which takes him to 35. And Kyle Vinoy was great in his year 32 season, depending on when his birthday was, but had a steep fall off in his year 33. And so you're going to have him for 2 years past that. So age is a bit of concern because part of what everyone was talking about with Crosby was he's so old. I was like, oh my God, how old is he? And I looked and I'm like, wow, he's not that old. He's my age, but I don't think I'm that old yet. But yeah, so I think if age was a concern there, then age should be a concern here. But
for sure,
again, and what Jonas said was one of my immediate thoughts is what can he do for all the other guys, the young guys? I still think they need some upgrades, and it's hard to upgrade at pass rusher through the draft because it just takes time, and that's something the Ravens don't really have right now. Sorry, Fitz is making himself known. Look, he did come on the podcast, but so if Fitz can rush the quarterback really well,
can Gianna's cat make an impression?
He would be more of a run defender, I think. He's very stout.
Okay.
But
Club Peebles.
Yeah. But anyway, so now I have to get my train of thought. Thank you for that.
No, but I mean,
thank you for my cat to that. But yeah, I think that what do they call it? A force multiplier is a word that John always likes to use, and I feel like he can be a force multiplier. And my question here, I don't know if Jonas wants to chime in. If you can pressure the quarterback so much, does it matter that you have some holes in the back end if they can't get the ball out? Because I do still have concerns behind the line as well.
Yeah. Obviously we're going to talk about Cheeto and his arrival. And I think, obviously, I know, Jenna, you're working on a story on Mike Mickens and just what he can bring to this defensive backfield, which definitely needs some work. So we'll see. I think it's going to be hard for Trey Hendrickson to play with a secondary worse than what he's dealt with in Cincinnati the past couple of years. They finally started to turn things around last year, but it just was not very good. Geno Stone, God bless him, was not the signing that they expected, excuse me, when they signed him. Other guys have just not been able to stay healthy. The linebackers have been terrible in coverage. So I think he will definitely come into a better situation with a better defensive mind as head coach, and maybe even a better defensive mind as defensive coordinator. I think the ironic thing here is like the Bengals weren't willing to pay Trey Hendrickson over the long term because they are just so opposed to guaranteed money, I think, in the second and third years of contracts, like except in the case of Joe Burrow, except in the case of Jamar Chase. And so he comes to Baltimore in large part because the Ravens were concerned about, are we going to be willing to pay Maxx Crosby in the second year of this deal, in the third year of this deal? So there is some nice irony, I guess that is the word here, in terms of like why Trey Hendrickson is in Baltimore as opposed to having already signed a deal that he wanted to stay in Cincinnati long term.
Yeah, and Hendrickson will be 36 by the time this deal ends. He is entering his age 32 season. He's 31 right now. But that is getting up there when you're talking about a pass rusher, especially one who's coming off core muscle surgery that we don't really know. So will he be productive by the end of this contract? Who's to say? But the Ravens also just have to worry about the short term. They have to worry about getting over the hump right now. It's part of the reason that they made such a short-term move to get Maxx Crosby. They were willing to deal 2 first-round picks to get a pass rusher who was going to help them right away. And if they were willing to do that and sacrifice some of their future, then they're probably willing to eat some money on the back end of this contract. I'm also interested to see what the structure of this contract looks like. I don't know if we have the details yet. Spotrac certainly doesn't, because think back to the Mark Andrews extension that he signed, announced as a 3-year deal, and then you find out, well, it's really a 2-year deal with a club option at the end of it. So maybe there is some kind of mechanism in this contract that allows the Ravens to get out of it early. One more note about the core muscle surgery, too. It is interesting that Trey Hendrickson played his last game of the 2025 season in late October against the Jets, his 7th and final game of the season. And then it wasn't until early December that he has his core muscle surgery. So there's clearly a time period there where they knew something wasn't right, but they didn't know exactly how to treat it. And so the fact that we're sitting here at 1:20 on Thursday, and Eric DeCosta has openly talked about the deal, but they haven't made it official. We haven't seen pen be put to paper. I think Ravens fans are
right.
I don't think I've seen anything about it. They've made other signings official. The Durham Smythe deal has been official. The Chidobe Awuzie deal has been official, but we have not seen it be official yet. So I think just given what has happened, what has transpired over the last 36 hours, I think it's...
What we learned is that I don't know what Trey Hendrickson looks like.
we know he looks... We know he has the same face as Tyler Linderbaum. I was going to make a joke about if the Ravens are believers in phrenology after seeing the Raiders put out their social video of Tyler Linderbaum doing a very, very close to the face selfie.
That was very close
to the Raiders faithful. It's like, wow, that looks like the face of a man that I'm about to know very, very well. So maybe the Ravens have a type when it comes to skull type. By the way, speaking of large white dudes, you guys want to hear my top 4 for the pass rush duo that never was in Baltimore?
Nicknames? Yeah. Sure.
I think my favorite is the Vanilla Vortex. How are we feeling about that? White Noise, I like.
Okay. That's what they call this podcast.
Caucasian Chaos. Oh, yeah. All these are names are also names for this podcast. I love that idea. Caucasian Chaos, and then the Pale Riders.
Well,
I'm glad none of those will have to see the light of day.
I can't comment because I saw a white guy in a hat and they didn't put a name on it, and I just thought it was Trey Hendrickson. So big white guy, I should say. Yeah, I can't. Even though I did write that blurb in the free agent tracker that we have going, I can't say that the face left an impression yet. Listen, I'm trying to get a lot of new faces lately because the cap's all,
That too. Yeah. A lot of new names and faces around Baltimore. One old name and old face that is sticking around for the short term, of course, is Lamar Jackson. Let's talk about the fact that he had his contract restructured and not extended. Guys, we knew that the Ravens would have to do something here. We knew that they would have to either extend Lamar Jackson or restructure his deal because he was carrying about a $75 million cap hit. He was supposed to take up about 25% of the Ravens cap in 2026. That is pretty much untenable. They had the one mechanism of restructuring the deal, which they could do without Lamar's consent because it's already a part of the contract, or they could hammer out an extension that would lower his cap hit for 2026 and spread that money later. Steve Bisciotti said in the press conference where they were discussing John Harbaugh's firing that he would love to get an extension done with Lamar Jackson before the start of free agency. Well, the start of free agency came and went, and Lamar did not sign an extension. That means that the Ravens and Lamar were not able to come to a number that they were comfortable with. Eric DeCosta said they ran out of time. He said they added a void year for 2030, but they freed up almost $40 million in cap space for 2026. The problem with this is, guys, it is only 1 year of cap relief. That Lamar Jackson still carries about a $75 million cap hit for next year, and that number is set to go up by at least $10 million. So this is just kicking the can down the road. Were you guys surprised at all that the Ravens were not able to get a contract extension done with Lamar after Steve Bisciotti publicly stumped to have one done?
I'm not surprised. I am disappointed. I'm getting raked by a certain portion of the fan base on X, whereas I believe in our reader comment section, they agree with me for pointing out that Lamar is only going to be here 2 more seasons if they don't get this done at some point. And as I said earlier, they can still get an extension done. And I just think, and I always preface this, I like Lamar as a person, and I think he's a great, great, great quarterback. But the optics of your owner saying that and explaining why he wants it done by the free agency period, which is because it makes it easier to team build around him to get the Super Bowl he says he wants, and then for it to not get done. When you say you run out of time, that means you missed your deadline. That's literally, if I ran out of time to get my story in, I missed my deadline, right? And we're very familiar with deadlines. And so what does that say about, from the outside, Lamar's desire to maybe give something up in order to win that Super Bowl he wants? He's the one who says he doesn't care about the MVPs, right? He only cares about the ring. What does that say about Eric DeCosta's ability to negotiate with him, the seriousness with which they take what Steve Bisciotti said? As Brian McFarland pointed out from Russell Street Report, this now will actually cost him extra because when you do sign that extension now, it comes with a signing bonus that you have to prorate over 5 years. And so you will absorb that cap hit on top of what they are currently have, like what they freed up. You're now going to take some of that away. And it freed up money, but like really not that much money. Consider how much they need to address still and need to have for the draft and any free agents they want to sign. And then if you break it down, that cap hit for next year is now $84.5 million. Yes, the cap will go up, but they're going to be in the same exact situation next year if they don't get an extension done. Lamar now has more of the negotiating power, which he always has a lot of negotiating power because they want him here and he's really, really good. And then if they don't get it the year after that, the concept of void years, for people who don't know, that means they can prorate it in terms of this dead money, which is money they've already paid him, but they're accounting for against the cap across many years. They account for it across the void year. But if you don't sign an extension, then all that money, all those void years disappear and it accelerates right onto that cap. So you would be paying $45 million for a player that is not playing for you. So it's just like a kind of a mess that they can still fix, but it's not a great look. Like, you should have done this before. Like, they announced that they negotiated a restructure. You don't have to negotiate. You can just do that. So they haven't actually negotiated anything yet. And I would like to think that Lamar, will get it done like he did the last time, without any public trade requests that drop at annual meeting, which is in a few weeks. But it's just disappointing that it's like Steve Bisciotti came out of his media hibernation to very, very publicly say this, and then someone on some ends didn't get it done, or multiple people on multiple ends. So it's just, when it's getting overlooked, I think, a little bit under all the other chaos, but it's just not great. It's not a great position to be in for the Ravens. That's my rant.
Yeah.
I think, like, the expectation and the reasonable expectation that we all have is that whenever that next extension is finalized, it's going to make Lamar the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, which means that he's going to be the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. But like, how deeply felt is like the siren song of next offseason for Lamar? Because again, it's hard to project exactly when the next quarterback up to top these markets will be, because you don't have to get to a certain point where it's not like there's a prescribed period in every person's contract where everyone will automatically get that next big money deal that makes them the number one quarterback. But when you look at what is coming down the pipeline, like, obviously, let's say CJ Stroud gets a deal, there's a possibility that he would become the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, even though I guess the smoke out of Houston is that maybe they're not all that thrilled about paying him what would be a record-breaking extension. But like, next year, you have Drake May becoming available for the first time for an extension, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, shout out Bo and Giana and their Auburn days together. But the problem with that is, like, if you are waiting for those guys to sign their extensions so that you can leapfrog them, as I understand it, they don't become available for extensions until the start of the new league year. So there is none of the benefit that you would get from being able to drag down that cap hit from like $84-90 million, whatever it's going to settle at, to the number that it needs to be to help this team. But if you are so interested in maximizing this window and maximizing your leverage to get the next number one highest paid quarterback contract, then that might mean waiting until this deluge of quarterbacks who are also going to get the number one quarterback deal in NFL history get theirs. And that's where it gets a little bit dicey. Like, that's where you really wonder, like, how much interest is there in helping this franchise be as competitive as possible versus how much interest do you have in being the highest paid quarterback, like, among your cohorts. Again,
right.
It's a delicate situation because we don't get much information from Eric DeCosta. Lamar doesn't want to talk about it. It's hard not to look at how much of a protracted mess the first extension was and not feel like there might be some of the same scratching and clawing to the finish line that we got. I would love to be wrong, and like, truthfully, I do think that a deal gets done before the season starts so that we just can eliminate this whole dark cloud hovering over what will be Jesse Minter's first season in Baltimore and Lamar Jackson's first year with him. But it would be unrealistic, if you're a Ravens fan, to say that there is not at least a shred of doubts or worry about this potentially becoming as much of a marathon session as the first extension that Lamar got was for everyone involved.
Yeah, and Lamar shouldn't. It's just bad business to just sign a contract, sign what's ever in front of you just because your owner publicly stumps for it. I mean, he's not going to do that. So we don't know what the kind of offers were that have been exchanged. If there were offers, Eric DeCosta said that they're hopeful that they can get an extension done, and they still can. But just because the owner comes out and says we'd like to get an extension done doesn't mean that Lamar should ethically come out and just sign whatever deal is in front of him. And this is the case with all of these free agents. I think a lot of times people look from the outside and say, what is an extra $5 million? Why are these negotiations being dragged out when, God, I would love to have to decide between $25 and $30 million. And I would rather take 25 to play in a place that I would like. But the reality is, and this is not the case with Lamar. Lamar doesn't have an agent, very famously, and he doesn't have to listen to people. A lot of times these players are influenced by their agents who want to maximize profit. And these guys also are under the impression rightfully or not, that their decision impacts all of the guys that come after them, that they set the market in order for the guy behind them to get paid. Like, if Lamar Jackson waits for Bo Nix or Drake May or Caleb Williams to sign their extension, and then he gets paid even more than that, those guys will have set him up to get a certain extension, and he will have them to thank in part for getting even more money. So this is the players, in a way, if you want to take their side of this kind of contract negotiation, of helping each other out along the line. It's just going to be fascinating to see how this whole thing works out.
And,
ahead,
you know, this is like a big thing in my own head where I'm like, you know, get your money, get your respect, right? We talk about, you know, setting the, like, or helping out, setting up the people behind you. For example, Saquon, when he signed his, it was like, get the respect for the running backs. And that's happened a lot. But then you also, the problem is you look around the league and you look at the salary cap and you look at just like the logistics of it. And there is that balance of like, if you really, really want to win, sometimes good leaders, and I'm not trying to say Lamar's not, but sometimes good leaders, if you look in, I don't know, a good example
George
in
Washington.
hockey, since my mind, so my mind is in hockey right now. In the past, like the Penguins or, you know, Connor McDavid with the Oilers, their leaders will take team-friendly deals and say, go get the guys I want around me. And I think Lamar does say, like, go get the guys I want, but then the Ravens are constantly in a tight salary cap with very little relief over the past few years. So it is a balance where I'm like, does Lamar deserve the best contract out of in quarterback history? Yes, like he does. Don't get me wrong. But then that contract is not realistic sometimes with the goals that they say they have as an organization.
I will say though, like, I think it's the Ravens are perpetually tight against the cap because that's what Eric DeCosta wants, because that's what you need to have to be competitive with as many high-priced veterans as they do have. And
they like to get a lot of market-setting deals.
Yeah, I
right?
know. I mean, like
a lot of them.
It's not like Eric DeCosta is unwilling to break the freaking bank for players that he believes are generational. I mean, if you want, it's still mind blowing. I completely forgot about just how much of an outlier Kyle Hamilton's deal is. If you want to like go to Spot Track and look at safety salaries, I think Kyle Hamilton is number one in terms of AAV at $25 million per year. I think number two is like 21. So basically a 25% increase over the next highest guy. Like, obviously we've seen when they nominated Badabike, when they gave him that $100 million extension or whatever it was, I think like he was the only reason why he wasn't the number one highest paid interior defensive lineman in the NFL was because Aaron Donald still existed, and Aaron Donald was still getting a healthy paycheck from the Rams. So it is not, as we understand it, like an unwillingness from Ravens ownership or from Eric DeCosta to hand huge money to guys. Obviously, I guess I don't want to say the elephant in the room, but like the consideration here, perhaps from Eric DeCosta and, you know, all the Ravens negotiators that they have is like Lamar is older than he was when he signed his last deal. And we've already seen him get a little bit more wear and tear, and maybe some of that, you know, fifth gear become more of a fourth gear. And what does that mean for guaranteed money in the long haul? Like the Ravens can structure these deals a lot of different ways to basically guarantee like 80% of the millions of dollars in a contract. But is there going to be any more resistance to, you know, guaranteeing the money in year 4 of a 5-year contract because of the possibility of wear and tear, and just what once made you special is no longer as special as during your heyday?
I'm sorry to keep this going, Paul, but one last thing, what Jonas said is, I will say, and I will counter this, but there's conversations about the league that I've heard about the style of Lamar's play leading to faster wear and tear. So there's certainly that perception around the league. I'm going to counter it with he did adapt his play over the past few years, playing a little bit more from the pocket, and that's how he was able to set records ahead of last season. But when it comes to negotiating, it's not just about what you and the Ravens think, but also, you know, perceptions around the league and what you're going to be able to do. So I will put it out there that there's certainly a camp that thinks that he might fall off a cliff soon.
Jonas, you mentioned George Washington is a great leader. Do you think he ever petitioned Continental Congress to get less money so that he could have more ammunition or clothes or food for his soldiers?
I don't think so. I don't know.
They didn't have a whole lot of money back in the day for the Continental Army. So
the very baby United States.
I don't really. I remember reading a book about the founding fathers in high school, but it's been a while since I've got my my founding father hat on.
I think all of our Lamar conversations need to be, what would George Washington do? All right, guys, we're over an hour long, and we still have yet to talk about some of the other additions to this Ravens rosters and subtractions as free agency rolls along. Eric DeCosta did say hopefully he's not going to make too many moves over the weekend so that he'll try to keep our weekend free. That would be very much appreciated.
He said that, and then we woke up to 3 pieces of news.
I know. Well, I'd rather get it done during the week as opposed to over the weekend. Let's talk about the fact that Chidobe Awuzie is back on a 1-year, $5 million deal, not $5, as was initially tweeted by Jeff Zrebeck. Cheeto quote tweeted that and said just enough for a McChicken, a little bit more than $5. But Chidobe Awuzie comes back to the Ravens after he beat Jair Alexander in the training camp battle, ended up being the starter for most of the season, played 14 games. He's going to be entering his age 31 season. I said before free agency started on my podcast with you, Jonas, that I think a lot of Ravens fans have an unfortunate, indelible memory of him getting cooked by Calvin Austin in the game against the Steelers in Week 18 on a back-breaking touchdown. He was a lot better than that one moment showed, and the Ravens clearly feel that they're confident in him at least getting a shot at that second outside cornerback spot with Marlon Humphrey probably back in the slot there. They also signed safety Jalen Hawkins, 29 years old, reported 2-year, $10 million deal, 3.5 seasons with Atlanta, half season with the Chargers, 2 seasons with New England. He was PFF's number 15 safety in 2025, coming off his best year. They also signed tight end Durham Smythe, 30 years old, 8 seasons in the NFL, 7 with Miami, last year with Chicago, so he has that Declan Doyle connection. This is probably the Charlie Kohler replacement, more of a blocking tight end, had just 25 receiving yards last year. And then one more addition to talk about. They're signing offensive lineman Jovan Gwynn, 2023 7th-round pick out of South Carolina, 3 seasons, but he has not played a whole lot. He is a reserve offensive lineman coming from Atlanta, so he has the connection to offensive line coach Dwayne Ledford. Only 11 snaps, according to Pro Football Focus, 9 at right guard. Guys, what do you like about these additions as Eric DeCosta tries to fill out the roster and replace a lot of the guys that have departed?
Yeah, I think they got their third safety. I think that's a reasonable price for a guy who might not be on the field 100% of the snaps. I think
in Jalen Hawkins.
I think 2 years, $10 million for this guy who, I've only really started to dig into the film of and read up on, is eminently more reasonable than what, like the $8 million per year that Alohi Gilman got from the Chiefs, right? Like, I think I would much rather take my chances with this guy coming from that New England system. Again, the hope is that the Ravens can play a lot of shell coverage, not have to drop a safety into the box to help with the run defense. And so you're basically having him be your kind of prototypical quarters safety, having the depth to keep guys from outracing you downfield on post routes and go routes and corners and all that stuff, but also being able to fit the run from depth. I think he was like basically New England's designated deep safety last year. Obviously that there were probably plenty of times when he split the field and was, he had the left half and the guy had the right half. But I think considering what he did in New England, you have to worry a little bit about just, is he a one-year wonder who really just took this contract year and ran with it? But I don't think like that the asks of Raven safeties in the systems, especially deep safeties, are going to be onerous. Like, you're not asking these guys to be Earl Thomas in his heyday. You're just asking them to tackle well, to be obnoxiously communicative, to be smart, to be hardworking, and to pair that with a nice signing in Cheeto. Like, I think that is good business. Obviously, the main concern with Cheeto this year is the same that it was last year. Is this guy going to hold up? We saw him miss a couple games toward the end of last year after that weird net incident in Cincinnati where he was kind of struggled to get right pretty quickly. But If he's healthy, then this is was the guy who was probably the Ravens' best covered corner last year, because Nate Wiggins had a pretty disastrous second half. Probably had a disastrous 2025 in general, and Cheeto was forcing tight window throws. He was getting his hand on the ball, and he was just doing whatever he needed to do when he was out there at that outside cornerback spot.
Obnoxiously communicative is also another alternate name. That's alternate name for our podcast as well.
And again, if Trey Hendrickson's getting the pass rush home, do you really need to be that good in the back end? No, you definitely do. But I think Cheeto is awesome to bring back. He certainly earned that. Early on, we heard so much about like Jair Alexander's leadership, blah, blah. Jair Alexander's career here went as it did. But I think it was quietly, went much more under the radar how much of an impact that Cheeto had. He and Nate Wiggins were talking a lot. Nate really looked up to him. He had his ups and downs, but he's learning from a guy who's been in the league for a long time. And no matter what his ceiling is versus Nate's, it's always good to hear from a guy that can stick around for that long. And so that gives you some depth at a position. He did have a little bit of injury issue, and he is getting older. So that's just like a small concern, but it's only 1 year deal. And I think a lot of the problem here is I'm a little scarred from last season and looking at their roster and being like, wow, this is so good. And then picking them as Super Bowl favorites. And then what happened.
You picked them as Super Bowl champions.
Yeah. And so I'm hesitant to really like hype up people too much, but I do think that that's really solid. And Jalen Hawkins just adds also that maybe veteran presence next to Malachi. It's kind of similar, I think, Nate and Cheeto with Jalen and Malachi, or Alohi and Malachi is like Malachi has really high upside, but as he was very honest about last season, there was a lot to learn, and it's really hard to just jump in as a rookie. So kind of has that steadying presence. I do think his, if you look at his stats over the past few years, they're very, very up and down. So he's a little bit more of a question mark to me, but you're treating it as you can, and you can still go get a guy in the draft. I do think it's funny that our roundtable we were asked, what can you address the best in the draft out of the open positions? And I know some of the answers were third safety and Charlie Kolar, and those are the two that they brought in. But Durham might be a great guy. Looking forward to getting to know him, but we can't say he's a true Charlie Kolar replacement until he rocks some braids in the locker room, So Charlie is irreplaceable in my mind. I will miss the quotes very much. So
that's fair.
Yeah, but those are the ones that stick out to me. I did think that people should go look at Jonas's compilation of the new O-line guy, because you can get a pretty good idea of his career there.
Yeah. You can read about all these additions on thebanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months.
Shout out to the Baltimore Bengals.
Yeah, Carmelo Anthony knows what he's talking about here. We also have a running tracker on all of the moves that are being made here. The Ravens have seen so many guys walk out the door. Tyler Linderbaum to the Raiders, Jordan Stout to the Giants, Isaiah Likely to the Giants, Draymond Jones to the Patriots, Charlie Kolar to the Chargers, Ardarius Washington to the Giants, Jake Hummel to the Texans, Alohi Gilman to the Chiefs, Patrick Ricard to the Giants, and Keaton Mitchell to the LA Chargers. That broke this morning. Reported 2-year, $9.25 million deal for Keaton Mitchell. So Ravens do not place any kind of tender on him. He was a restricted free agent. He walks out the door, and they have also decided to part ways with Cooper Rush, cutting him and saving only $500,000. Could have been more than $2 million if he had been designated as a post-June 1 cut. It's obvious why Cooper Rush was shown the door. The Ravens decided to bring back Tyler Huntley. But how surprised were you guys by the fact that not only did the Ravens not place any kind of tender on Keaton Mitchell, but that the nickname that Jonas has never gotten to take off, Tiny Horse, for Keaton Mitchell, that Tiny Horse finds another home?
I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, I thought that the contract figure that I threw out in my free agency preview as a way of keeping him wasn't all that off from what he got. I pitched 2 years, $8 million. He gets 2 years, $9.25 million. Obviously, you have the free agency to kind of boost that number. I don't know if he and his agents would have been comfortable with just $8 million, but like I thought it basically ends rather close to either the midpoint or the higher end of the low tender and the second round tender. Like, let's be honest, no one was going to give up a second round pick for Keaton Mitchell and his 300 career snaps. But I just thought that because of everything, I think we've already said this, Paul, like because of everything that Declan Doyle has said about explosives, and here's Keaton Mitchell, a guy who is a walk-in explosive play, I thought that they would have made more of an effort to keep him. But the ironic thing is, like, he is leaving a team that is perhaps overinvested in running backs and underinvested in offensive linemen, and going to a Chargers team that is just flat out refusing to pay even $10 million for a free agent offensive line starter. So good luck to him. He's going to be awesome to watch in that Mike McDaniel. Yeah, Mike. It's not Mike.
Yeah, there it is.
The Mike McDaniel offense. Obviously the two great tackles there. Just a brilliant offensive mind. It's going to be very, very fun to see what he does there. But
at Charlie Kohler blocking.
And I just hope they have a guard and center, because otherwise it's probably going to be a lot of 20-yard runs and maybe minus 2-yard losses.
Which isn't that different from how they were using him here. Like, he was starting to run between tackles a little bit, but they didn't really call that many plays like that for him. I think I was not surprised by not placing the tender, because I think it's a similar situation to Ardarius Washington, right? Where it's like, this is a guy that the organization has loved, but there's a difference between like front office and coaching, and the coaches that loved him and saw all the behind the scenes stuff are no longer here, right? Because neither of them really have that much on tape. They both have dealt with a lot of injuries. They're both undrafted free agents. And so teams who are on the outside don't see the fight it took to get back on the field. They don't see what they contribute in practice. They don't see what they contribute in the locker room. So there's less of that attachment to them. And sure enough, they both went to people that do still know them. Ardarius went to John Harbaugh at the Giants, and Keaton goes to Jim Harbaugh and former Ravens executive Joe Ortiz at the Chargers. So I wasn't surprised by who picked him up. I wasn't surprised by the fact they let them go. And I'm seeing everyone saying Keaton Mitchell and Mike McDaniel. Like, you think of Mike McDaniel's offense, you think of speed, and you think of Keaton Mitchell, and you think of that lightning fast speed. So I'll miss having him around the locker room. I'll miss having basically all those guys around. They were all good guys, and that's something I hear a lot from players who departed, is they miss the Ravens locker room. So it will look kind of different next year, but it's really a fresh start in a lot of ways.
Yeah. By the way, the Trey Hendrickson deal is now official. Ravens have tweeted it out. Gianna, this is Trey Hendrickson. This is not Durham Smythe, just so you know.
Oh, that helps so much. I can see his face totally.
So the physical has been passed, guys. Trey Hendrickson is a Baltimore Raven. After all that, one day we will write an oral history of what has been the longest week of our collective lives. At Gianna_Jade is her handle. At Jonas Shaffer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano, at Old Banner Sports. We have so much more coverage for you on all of our social platforms, on thebanner.com. Kyle Goon is writing great columns. Thank you guys for sticking with us. This has been a lot of podcasts in a short amount of time. We really appreciate you guys following on Facebook, YouTube, X, listening to us on any of these platforms. It's been fun to bring these podcasts to you, harrowing at times to try to fit it in. But we do really appreciate your following, your readership, your eyeballs, your ear holes. Thanks so much for following, guys. Yeah, Gianna hated that.
Paul, understandable. Because we were talking about podcast names for us, since we have Gianna on with us, is like we've gone from Vanilla Vortex.
How offensive is this going to be?
It's not going to be that offensive. We've gone from Vanilla Vortex to Asian Fusion. Is that what we've done here?
Yeah, that is.
Gianna, do you co-sign?
I actually used that term this morning. So. Except for I don't like Asian fusion food. I don't like Asian fusion food. We won't get into that. We won't start that rant. You're right. You triggered a few rants this trip, but not
considering we're 75 minutes in. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back with another episode at some point down the line.